Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host. My name is Connor. There is my co-host. His name is Phil.
Hola.
And we are here today to talk to you about UFC 308, better known as the final and also first proof that Phil and I actually know what we're talking about. Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway for the featherweight championship. That was the highly anticipated main event of this card. And it was a crushing disappointment for every MMA fan who loves Max Holloway, which is to say 95% of all MMA fans. But just a little bit of sweetness in there for smart lads like Phil and I, who, I think, for once in our fucking lives actually did a pretty damn good job of understanding the dynamics of this fight. Just before we jump in, I'll say, of course, we had Khamzat Chimaev, Robert Whittaker, more crushing disappointment, but that'll be interesting to talk about. Magomed Ankalaev actually had what I thought was a pretty badass fight with Alexander Rakic, defying all expectations. And Lerone Murphy went tooth and nail with Dan Ige. So we're going to talk about all of that, whatever we have time for, maybe even touch on one or two of the fights coming up next week. If so, that'll almost certainly be bonus material. But no further delay, no more ado. Ilia Topuria knocked out Max Holloway. And I think we nailed it, Phil.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
I think we actually kind of nailed this one. By the way, this was another fight that was every bit as engaging and fascinating as Pereira Roundtree, but obviously at a mutually higher level down at featherweight. Yes. What a tactical battle this was between these two great strikers. Loved every minute of it.
Yeah, this was also one of those ones where, like, it reveals to you at least from my perspective, it reveals to me my like true self and how I feel about like the fights and what's going on. Because a lot of the time when a fight is coming up, I'll be like, oh yeah, I like this guy, and I don't particularly care for the other guy, but the guy that I'm not as invested in the other guy, but I think the other guy's just going to win. And as the fight gets closer, and it comes, and the fight, begins, my ego kind of takes over to an extent, and I'm just like, I would just like to be proven right here. I would like to, even though I like this guy, I picked him to lose. I would like for my analysis to not look stupid. And with this fight, that just didn't happen at all, because I was in there and I was just like, kill him, Max, kill him, get him,
get his ass
bastard up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was a little sad at the end of it. Like,
sure.
I was like, I don't want to be right, just get him.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, this was obviously like a completely sensational fight for as long as it lasted. One of those performances where I don't think you could have sincere criticisms for either guy. Not really, in terms of like how they approached it. How, what you could be expecting of them. I thought Max looked great. I thought Topuria did an amazing job of adjusting to a Max that looked great. It was just fantastic. It was amazing, and it made me very sad.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing, is that I've been made sad when every single featherweight champion has lost their belt, or has,
They're all so great
lost.
And likable. That's the other thing. We talked about the unparalleled and consistent greatness of the men who have ruled this one division. What we didn't talk about is that they're all kind of cool guys. I know Jose Aldo's like a big Bolsonaro dude. He's got the minion room and all that, but I think he's still a pretty cool guy interpersonally, to be honest. And certainly Max and Volkanovski are both incredibly lovable.
I was pretty devastated when Mike Brown lost to Jose. Hold on, I'm not gonna lie.
Mike Brown's a cool guy too.
Mike Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
The only one where I was like, good, get him, was like Uriah Faber.
Yeah.
He was the last one where I was just like, sure, yeah, get out of here.
Yeah. I mean, and you know what? I think Topuria may also join that company. I don't know. This is, I'm so disengaged from like fighter interviews and stuff like that I am frequently way behind on the sort of like growing sentiment around a given fighter. Mm-hmm. So I've gathered that a lot of people dislike Ilia Topuria personally. They think he's arrogant and cocky, and these are pretty common. Sometimes true, sometimes completely off base critiques that get lobbied at upcoming rising stars. But if whether or not that is the case, I don't know genuinely how he comes across in these interviews that make people mad. I thought he was very, very sweet and nice after this fight. I thought he was immensely respectful of Max Holloway, and I thought he was immensely respectful of Alexander Volkanovski too. He straight up said, I want to hug Alexander Volkanovski. I don't want to fight anyone right now. I want to go home and spend time with my family. But if anybody deserves a rematch, it's this guy. So let's make it happen. I was like, wow. Another sweetie to ruthlessly rule over the featherweight division. I love it. Hard as it is to see Max.
I mean, there's been some stuff where he's been like, I think I'm the best fighter in the world.
Well, how dare he?
I think I will win fights with people. And, he's done some, I think he's done some stuff with the BMF belt, which, you know what? I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, also, every one of them kind of does this stuff and everyone gets mad at them and then they forget that they were ever mad at them. Like Max Holloway, do you remember his, Jose Waldo thing?
Yeah.
It was like, where's Waldo? Because he never turns up to fight or something. I remembers that.
Yeah.
I remember being annoyed with Volkanovski because he apparently robbed Jose when he fought him, or had the temerity to think that he was also better than Max Holloway, which actually turned out to be true. No one remembers this or cares about it.
Yeah, it's just that people don't like things that are new. Because to me, Topuria, again, I have not been watching a bunch of his interviews, but I have not seen anything that suggests that he is unusually cocky for a guy who very clearly is one of the best fighters ever. So, he seems appropriately confident to me from the little that I've seen. And I really enjoyed the respect that he showed for both Max and Volkanovski at this event. I thought it was very sweet.
I look forward to being devastated when he eventually gets, brutally finished by the next guy who everyone hates, and then it turns out is actually great.
Yeah. In 5 years, when he's defeated by ascendant Christian Rodriguez, my guy, I'll be crushed. I will have come to love Topuria as much as I love Max and Volk. And Jose, of course. So let's talk about the fight, because it was a scintillating battle. Very back and forth, many subtle shifts of momentum, lots and lots of question and answer fighting between these two great strikers. What did you think when it started out? How did the story develop?
I thought Max was the open question for me.
Yeah.
More so than Topuria was, because he's had such a diversity of approaches throughout his time in the UFC, and I think that Topuria is much more defined. It's like, is he going to go for his standing up tall approach, where he's trying to get away from when he's trying to sort of reduce the risk of low kicks? He's going to go southpaw. How is he going to approach this? Is he going to, as we kind of said beforehand, is he going to be going forward or backwards? And I think in terms of like the fear from us was that this was going to be a sort of largely backwards moving performance from Holloway, and that he would get pushed into the fence and beaten up. And it's not like that didn't happen, but I don't think that's necessarily a reflection on his approach as much as it is just, Ilia Topuria's just good at that. So yeah, we actually saw like a quite aggressive, like an aggressive counterpunching approach from Max.
Yeah.
Just like very heavy on like a committal lead hand. He wasn't putting out feelers there for Topuria to throw the right hand over the top of it. He was like looking to stay in with the jab, and he was also looking to land the counter left hook when Topuria came in. Yeah, I thought a lot of the early exchanges were kind of Max. And again, this was a good call from you, I think, was, to shout out that Max is actually, like, he's a genuinely pretty sharp counterpuncher. Yep. And I think in this fight, his counterpunching looked maybe the best I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
Just, like, very dialed in, catching Topuria's entries with the left hook, like, relatively consistently throughout first round, and then sort of, I think Topuria made adjustments after that. But yeah, I thought like his approach, it made a lot of sense. He was sort of holding the initiative without necessarily doing the thing of just, trying to bum rush Topuria, which again might have worked, but as we've seen, the question that people had, which was that, like, is Max still completely immortal? And that is not the case. So it would have been a gamble which I don't think was worth taking in retrospect.
His chin does not necessarily have to go eventually, Phil, if you'll remember.
And that is true.
Yeah.
Except that, unfortunately, yes, time is a real thing. But I'm not gonna talk shit about anyone who is like, I think Max is gonna, he's just gonna be holding up over the course of his career, because apart from anything else, you don't want to think about this kind of stuff happening to people. You don't want to think about, like, and it's hard to imagine, when you see Anderson Silva just tanking clean right hands from Dan Henderson. One day he's just gonna get knocked out clean, or
even when
Carlos Condit just taking everything Johnny Hendricks can throw at him, and then not that much later he's getting like badly hurt by Damian Maia ground and pound.
Right.
It just happens, and I can't really fault people for like being like, I cannot believe this will happen to Max Holloway.
Well, I will if they were rude and stupid about it, but I will say that even though I very much focused on the possibility that this could be a knockout loss for Max and that he would be getting hurt by Topuria, and that he probably knew that he couldn't just walk through shots the way he used to. Even having said all that and knowing that that was a possibility, when he got hit by that big right hand in round 3, I still did not think he was about to get KO'd.
No.
He was hurt, he retreated, but man, he did recover fast. Like, you can even watch it in the slow-mo, his eyes coming back to focus. And you're like, shit, it's going to be like the Poirier fight. This is going to be rough, but he's going to hold it together. Mm-hmm. And no, Topuria just hit him with not only one of the most savagely powerful, but one of the most beautiful left hooks I think I've seen in quite a long time. A genuinely perfect finishing shot from Topuria. And that was it. Even Max Holloway's chin cannot last forever. And it has to be said, Ilia Topuria may be one of the hardest hitters in featherweight history.
Yeah.
He is an incredibly powerful and not just like a brick-fisted power puncher, but an incredibly clean, well put together offensive boxer. So there's like, you can look at his knockout shots, like the right hand he hit Jai Herbert with, or the left hook he landed here, and you're like, of course that knocked dude out. That was a perfect punch, perfectly placed, excellent leverage and weight transfer, just the right amount of pop in the shoulder, nice and short usually these punches. Like, you can't say a bad thing about shots like these from Topuria, and I think he probably has natural power, obviously. I think he's a great athlete, but some of it is technique. Some of it just comes down to the fact that he is like a Canelo Alvarez style skilled technician who really pays attention to the details of how he throws his punches.
Yep. Well, famously, literally learned from watching Canelo Alvarez videos, right?
Yeah. And it
mimicked him.
It really comes through.
And it stuck.
Yeah, the only difference between him and Canelo is that Ilya knows how to cut off the cage. Oh, a little Canelo burn there. Genuinely, though, he's a better defined pressure fighter than Canelo, while having a shallower but very similar kind of approach to pocket boxing.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think, and that was a big part of like what started to change the tide of this fight, I think, because that, I think the Max, when the fight was starting out, Max was able to sort of intercept him or jab him and push him back in the pocket. And, on retreats, it's still, Topuria is still an MMA fighter, and Max was still able to chase after him with, tricky Max Holloway combinations, running after him with the left uppercut or the long right, or, but I think it was Topuria shortening the distance he started his entries from, feinting his way inside, all very Volkanovski stuff. Yeah. Just shortened his distance so that he was actually sort of within Max's effective range, when he started his offense, and then, attacking the lead leg, feinting, and then using Max's reactions to the feints to essentially just push him backwards towards the black lines, where then he could just, as he typically does, just go for him. Yeah.
Topuria is in fact, I want to talk a good bit about this, because I think it is not only a key to the fight, as you just laid out, but a really core component of Topuria's style and his success. His entries are excellent. Excellent. I mean, this is why he's got the footwork to cut off the cage, and he is inclined to pressuring, but really one of the things that makes him such a devastating pressure fighter is just how flexible he is in actually getting into his punching range. He just has a lot of tricks. And, or rather, because it's Topuria, as you said, he's really there's a pretty narrow band of stuff that he wants to do. Mm-hmm. So rather than having a lot of tricks, he really has many, many permutations of a few simple ideas. There's, the footwork, just simply getting the feet closer before you initiate. There's the feints, which is a category about as broad and as deep as the entire rest of this sort of the entire rest of the list of ways of entering. He has a lot of different ways of feints. He's also really good at changing. He picks up on the opponent's sort of defensive impulses and will change up the order of his punches. For example, the lead right got punished the first time he tried it in this fight, and then it kind of went away. He went back to his jab, and then late round 2, round 3, suddenly the lead right started nailing Max. He had found a way of setting it up by getting rid of it for a bit and getting Max to bite on the lead hand. But very important to the ending sequence of this fight, he also changes his rhythm when he enters. Mm-hmm. And that is what really, really threw Max for a loop when he ate that nasty right hand in round 3, is that Topuria came in, he did a little jab feint, and then like a slapping hook, which he uses to close the distance. But the right hand comes just half a beat too soon after the left hook, because you can see Max reacting. You can see his eyes go over to the left hand, the slap that's coming his way. And in that moment, he decides he wants to shift backwards, which is always a risky move, right? You're changing stance right in front of your opponent. You are essentially removing your body's ability to withstand a powerful clean punch. You're taking the shocks off of your wheels when you do that. And it is in this moment that Topuria's right hand, which is just a little too fast on the heels of the setup, catches Max in like a transition between stances. And that's why it hurts him so bad. He doesn't see it coming, and it just surprises the fuck out of him when he is completely out of position to absorb it. So rhythm, shot selection, feints, and just diligent footwork and maintenance of distance. Like, Ilia Topuria is a master of closing the gap in ways that are fatally surprising to his opponents.
And then, whilst he's still, as you said, like vulnerable to running straight backwards when he's being pressured, or when he goes deeper into exchanges, he's still really, really often he is entering and then he is using pivots to get back out again. He is leaving on an angle, and he is leaving with his, with his feet still under him to throw counters.
Yep. And I thought he actually, it seemed to me he sort of recognized the vulnerability to Max's blitzing, shifting combinations, that those would be used to punish his straight line retreats, because I thought he actually, really early in the fight, Max he's not liking the pressure, and he tries to scare him off with one of these big blitzes. His feet get way out of position, and Topuria takes one hop step back and is literally a quarter inch away from KOing Max in the first round with a Conor McGregor hop step cross counter. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple things like that in this fight where I thought Topuria actually, it suggested to me that he had picked up on this weakness and had prepared a couple things. I thought his backstep counter punches were actually there for him quite a bit. And that's probably part of the reason Max wasn't able to build more pressure. I don't think it was really in his game plan, as we supposed. I think he had that Gaethje fight. He's had a lot of these fights, and he just thought, I'm going to go in there and out-slick Ilia Topuria. But, there were a couple points in the fight where I think he might have liked to put a little more pressure on Topuria, and counters like that made that a much more difficult proposition.
Yeah. As you said, I think it didn't look like, even if he tried to be extremely aggressive, like it would have been there for him. I think there's, maybe tiny tactical things you might have wanted to see more from him.
Yeah.
I think he probably could have kicked more.
Mm-hmm.
Topuria wasn't generally carrying or working his way inside off defended kicks. It's mostly just backing out of the way of them.
Yep.
Again, I just don't know how sustainable that would be, because I think the other thing about kicks is that they typically require you to set your feet, and so much of what Ilia made work was that he takes victories. If they're not in terms of damage, he'll take victories in terms of space.
Yeah. And literally
Max, and this was I
was just going to say that the KO punch lands while Max has committed himself to a counter knee. So I will just say, planting your feet in front of Topuria to kick him can be exceedingly dangerous. Now, please go on.
But yeah, Topuria was, he was taking spatial victories, as much as he's taking, like, damage. And to stand there and kick him, you're not moving much. And I think I think he did a good job, of fighting defensively whilst keeping a good idea of where he was in the cage. Again, this was like what makes this like a great fight. And, something that you can look at and say, this is genuinely amazing stuff by two incredible fighters, is that it doesn't have any of those, or much of those flaws that you just naturally expect are going to be turning up every time in an MMA fight.
Right.
Like, Max genuinely has, like, pretty good cagecraft throughout the whole fight. He only gets pushed back into the cage when he absolutely has to be, where he's, been outmaneuvered in one way or the other.
And he generally gets out really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Just a super, super high-level fight.
Yeah. He is just the truth.
He is. Yeah. Obviously, just before we move on, just a couple things to pick up for me that obviously a huge part of the tactical struggle here was centered around Max's jab, as we suspected. There was a big battle that shifted back and forth multiple times between Topuria just straight up running into the jab and a couple times even getting set up off of it. There were a couple instances of him crushing the jab with the calf kick counter, as we supposed he probably would. But there was also a period where the low kick kind of went away because Max did exactly what he did when I talked about this, when Calvin Kattar was strafing him with some heavy low kicks and just crashed in and crowded with like a blitzing combination, much safer and better timed than the one he nearly got knocked out for trying early in the fight because, like you just said before, Topuria had planted his feet to kick. He was vulnerable. And Max got in his grill, and it had an effect on Topuria like it often does on, say, Jose Aldo, where he's like, okay, I'm not going to kick anymore. They came back, which shows Topuria's incredible thoughtfulness in there, that it is a shockingly important and shockingly rare quality for a fighter to have, that he doesn't forget about things. He will go back or find new routes to get back to things that initially worked, even if they are met with an answer. Like, even Jose Aldo doesn't do this. It's a rare quality to keep that presence of mind. But it had an effect. And for a minute there, end of round one and a couple minutes in round two, Holloway with the jabs, a little bit of pressure, and the kicking game, he really did have Topuria stuck at long range. He made Topuria super uncomfortable, which is the other thing I want to highlight about this fight, because I think really the crux of our concern in picking Topuria, like that thread on Twitter that you retweeted, was what happens if Topuria isn't just given a fight that is comfortable to him? And I think we finally got to see that. We got to see a fight where he was trying to impose himself, and for some pretty long periods, it simply wasn't working. He wasn't able to get to build any significant pressure. He was not able to force his entries. And what we learned about Topuria is that he can remain calm, take a step back to long range where he knows he's safe, mentally and sort of tactically reset himself, and just find a new way of starting the ball rolling again. I don't know still how he would have responded if Max had managed to really build some serious sustained pressure on him. But again, I don't think it was for no reason that Max didn't manage to do that. I think he probably would have found his way there, even if it wasn't his plan A, as he did against Calvin Kattar. If he could have.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely points where I was like, And especially, when you see just things like the size difference, the fact that
Yeah.
Topuria is swinging his shots super hard, when he misses a few of them, you're like, man, is this guy going to gas out?
Yep.
They keep this pace up against Max Holloway? And yes. The answer is yes.
Yes, he can.
He can, keep the idea of what his strategic game plan is in his head whilst making tactical adjustments. He can get buzzed and hit and come back. I think the only thing that we can say about Topuria that, says that he's probably not, that he might not have, a super long, incredibly dominant run at the top is that he doesn't have the Max Holloway chin. Like Volkanovski before him.
Yeah.
That, he hasn't had a career where he's just never been hurt by anyone.
Yeah. But I think he already has.
Other than that, he just.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, he just ticks every box.
Yeah. And I think he already has better defense than Max Holloway did to compensate.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And he is more singularly punishing than Max Holloway by far. Topuria does not need to drown you to kill you. And that makes a difference too, that, like Max really, really needed his chin because he was probably going to spend 20 minutes scrapping with you. Topuria might kill you in the first round. Which is another thing that makes a great chin a little less necessary. And also, as we saw in the Jai Herbert fight, he can recover like a beast too, which speaks to his, not only these mental qualities we've been discussing, but his conditioning. That he's in incredibly good shape when he fights too. So he is the truth. And I suppose it seems like now they I don't really give a fuck about seeing Diego Lopez fight Ilia Topuria. I gotta be honest. I think Topuria.
I'm fine with it. I just want to, he can just fight.
I don't have a problem with it.
I'm just glad it's not Brian fucking Ortega.
Oh, yeah. I don't have a problem with it. Let me be clear. It just doesn't and there's going to be some defenses. You're a champion. You're just going to have to defend the belt against the guy who's earned it. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Topuria will wreck him. I really think Topuria will demolish him and really break his spirit probably within the first 2 rounds. And
he's just the Brian Ortega of his generation.
Yes, absolutely.
He's there to go in there and for people to be like, oh, he's very dynamic, and then for him to then get brutally pasted. But
it seems like they're probably gonna do, if what Topuria says holds, they're probably gonna do a Volkanovski rematch. And
are you more excited for that?
Yes. Yes, I am. Because I know how flexible Topuria is as a fighter. I know he will come in with some different plans and some different preparation. And
it's less that. It's more that it's not that I'm worried about Topuria's preparation. I'm worried about Volkanovski having been on the tail end of 2 brutal knockout losses and then immediately going back in with the guy who KO'd him last time.
Yeah. I mean, that's it's fighting. What do you want?
I want Volkanovski to have an easier fight. I might see Topuria beat up.
I suppose from that perspective, I would much rather see Diego Lopez get knocked out. I'll say that.
Yeah.
But Volkanovski, I think, is a better fight. That's all I'm saying.
Sure, but I need to be convinced that Volkanovski is okay before I want to see him being put in there with someone who just slept Max Holloway.
Yeah. He did just knock out Max Holloway, didn't he? That's pretty fucking crazy, isn't it? He just straight up KO'd.
I can't believe I'm making the anti-glue factory argument here. I'm like, this old guy needs a break.
Well,
and you're like, no, put him in there.
Well,
I want to see if Volkanovski's giant head can come clean off his shoulders.
You're a goddamn hypocrite, Phil. I've known this for years. You're like, feed him to the glue factory.
You criticize me for this kind of stuff all the time.
Feed him to the glue factory. No, not my pet horse. Not Skittles.
Yeah.
Skittles is innocent.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I have some sense of like attachment to some people. But also, like, it's the fact that we don't know whether Volkanovski is, like, still...
Yeah, he might be done.
Championship level Volkanovski.
Yeah, he might be done. He was pretty old when he got the championship.
You don't know whether this is Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman.
Yeah.
After that fight, you were just like, immediately you're just like, he's really super done, isn't he?
Yeah, could be. Yeah, Volk is 36. He was pretty old when he won the title in the first place. I think he was already like 32, 33. It has at least already been longer, and if they do make that fight, will have been much longer than the interim between Makhachev 2 and Topuria for Volkanovski, which is at least something. That was a very quick turnaround from the first KO loss of his career. But yeah, I guess okay, fine. Volk wants it. That's the thing. I'm just accessing a different side of my love for Volk.
He's also said it's also sounded like he's suffering from clinical depression and that he's
true.
Buries himself in training for fights.
That's
so
true.
That he doesn't have to think about things.
Do you think
yeah, I don't want it.
That's true.
I don't want it.
Okay,
don't really want Topuria Makhachev because
no.
Jack Slack said, yeah.
Please
A,
fight a lightweight.
Just don't need any of that shit. And B, enough. Like, I don't need to see Makhachev defending against more featherweights.
You're the lightweight champ. Don't make me resent you by refusing to fight any lightweights, please. Yeah, okay. You've won me over. It struck me as patronizing to say to Volk, like, he wants it. But also I think, like, if I look back with the horrible depression that I know he suffered after those two losses, and then I look back at the interaction, it's almost like it might have hurt him that, like, Topuria was so nice to him. He came into the cage. I think Alex was kind of geared up for a little bit of like a let's get myself motivated. And instead Topuria was like, I love you. Yep. I respect you. I want to hug you. And he kind of had to adjust his face for a second to respond to that just innocent sweetness from Topuria. He might have liked a little bit of cockiness.
But it's also like, I was a fan of you. Yeah. I no longer see you as like as a competitor.
Yeah.
You are someone whose time has passed.
Yeah.
And I was inspired by you.
Yeah.
Like, in the nicest possible way. He was like, he was very much not threatened by Volk.
Yeah. You're a hero of mine. It's a shame that you're dead. Yeah. R.I.P., he says to the man's face. The thing is, Phil, if they don't give Volkanovski a title shot while he still has time left and the potential to come up with some good adjustments, because that's the other thing. If he is going to fight Topuria again, and he probably will, unless he loses his tune-up fight, time is running short. He's 36. Mm-hmm. And if they don't give him Topuria next, or give, rather, Topuria Volkanovski next, you know what they'll do, don't you? They're gonna do Holloway Volkanovski 4. Which will just sap more life out of the both of them. Like, they're not gonna give Volkanovski a soft touch if they don't do Topuria. He's one of the greatest of all time. He's gonna just have another really difficult fight.
Yeah, but I'm much more happy with seeing him fight either of the two alternatives to Topuria, which are basically whoever wins out of Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah, Evloev or Sterling, those would be cool opponents and a lot less scary. But also, I think they might try to make Holloway Volkanovski 4.
I don't think they'll do that. I think they know, and I think Max knows that the best place for him is 155. He's got an amazing. He should
just go back to lightweight for good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think everyone knows that, right? He's still got a big KO over a ranked opponent.
Yeah, I hope he knows that.
Yeah.
Cut out, get rid of the weight cut.
He did say that, right?
Possibly. Again, you're talking to a man who does not listen to fighter interviews, so I'll take your word for it. If so, then that's good. I would love for Max to go back to 155. Just excise that weight cut from his preparation and probably be more durable and feel better and have better reaction times and a speed advantage, all the things that you get from going up while still being a pretty big lightweight, at least in terms of height and reach. So I think he should totally just make 155 his home. Anyway, enough about who we're afraid of Topuria murdering next. The point is, Ilia Topuria has successfully made it through the gauntlet that it seems every featherweight champion has to go through of defeating one or two of the previous all-time greats who held that belt. And to me, you know, there's Conor McGregor's out there as a cautionary tale, but to me it already very strongly suggests that Topuria belongs in that same company, that he is himself. We are witnessing right now still the early stages of another all-time great featherweight championship career.
Yeah, I think there's, as I said, he just ticks all the boxes, man.
Yep.
Everything apart from raw, brute durability, which is admittedly the most important thing to have in MMA, but
yeah,
having literally everything else is pretty good.
Yeah. And it's not like he has a bad chin. We've seen him tank some nasty shots. He took hard shots from Josh Emmett. He took hard shots here from Max. You know, it's just one time that he's
one got booted in the head by someone up a weight class.
That one time that he literally leaned into a head kick blind and did survive. That's the cautionary note about his chin. I think he's probably durable enough to be an elite fighter. I think that's proven. He's the truth, man. Ilia Topuria, another legendary featherweight champion. Okay, let's take a break then on that note and get on to the rest of this card. We have, of course, the co-main event, which I don't think we're going to spend a ton of time on, and Magomed Ankalaev versus Alexander Rakic, which I think we'll spend a lot more time on than I would have expected. After that, Lerone Murphy, Dan Ige, and we'll see what else we can squeeze in or what else might end up on the Patreon as we near the end of October here. Anyway, Chimaev, Whittaker after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about this middleweight co-main event. We knew we were setting ourselves up, Phil. We knew. We felt it.
Yeah, of course.
Khamzat Chimaev. He made it to the event. It turns out he was still alive when they booked this fight. And he instantly subjected Robert Whittaker to his wrestling and instantly made me reconsider all that I said in our preview about Whittaker's incredible resilience against the wrestling of Yoel Romero. When I realized that Yoel Romero doesn't really have a riding game. And Khamzat Chimaev, like Khabib, like Islam, like a lot of these other guys from this part of the world, could basically win and has won fights with just his riding game. It's such an integral part of his wrestling. And it really made all the difference because Whittaker, look, I still think the way this fight started, if it had gone into a second round, we may very well have been looking at a Whittaker win. And he almost got there. He was fighting his ass off not to get stuck in a ride position, not to get fully controlled. And he really held Chimaev off very effectively for a long time. But he just couldn't actually get back to his feet or get back to space or get to a good position on the ground. He was playing nothing but defense as Chimaev just tried inexorably to advance position and start beating him up. And then it ended really, really, really suddenly with a horrible and strange injury. I have seen that kind of broken jaw, I think, once before. I want to say it was in Bellator. Maybe it was a Kazuo Misaki fight.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and the guy he was fighting had the same thing happen, where like his lower row of teeth were all still attached to the jawbone, but they were pushed back into his mouth. So the jaw had basically broken somewhere below his like lower lip. Really grisly. And that's what happened to Robert Whittaker. I was confused at first. Were you confused when he tapped immediately?
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck was that? And no, it was not just pain. He legitimately suffered a pretty gruesome injury. Takeaways. Anything surprise you? Other than the fact that comes out when he gets you down, it's not as easy to keep fighting as it is against Yoel Romero.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, just that he's a definitely like much more of a like complete modern grappler, which I guess we probably should have taken account of. But even then, you know, I don't know. I still find it to be like you said. This is a fight where we were just like, oh yeah, at this kind of point in where these two people are, you should pick Kamsat.
Yeah.
You know, someone who's been showing flaws and who has been, you know, hurtable early against someone who is just goes, you know, 10,000 miles an hour in the first round. I mean, I think Zane said it, that he thinks Kamsat might be the single best first round fighter in like MMA history.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you know what? He probably is. He's
up there with the likes of Conor McGregor. Obviously a very different approach, but yeah, he is just undeniable in the first round. No, I don't think anyone's even come close to winning a first round against Kamsat Chimaev. Mm-hmm. Nobody.
Yeah, pretty much every single first round is just like a 10-8. And yeah, there's the like the weird fact that Whittaker apparently has like a frail jaw.
Yeah, he
like,
said it was
a problem that he's had.
He said it was an issue he had. He said it was an issue he had in the Dricus fight as well.
Yeah, I mean, apparently it's a childhood issue. Apparently it's why he has a goatee. Is that he used to have like a plate in there to hold it together.
Oh shit!
And he grew out the goatee to cover it. So yeah, it's always been something which has troubled him.
I had no idea.
Yeah, no, me neither. But yeah, so I mean, it's still just kind of the same thing. I don't think there's really much to say about it, which is that like Kamsat is just like super dangerous in one round.
Yep.
And then he's just not anymore. And the thing is, with being super dangerous and dynamic in the first round, is that a lot of the time that is going to lead to finishes.
Mm-hmm.
And this just sort of felt like a statistically, it's just a statistically possible outcome of that happening.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a massive
it's
shock.
Like the coming out party that people have said that it is, at least for me, because I'm just like, it's just the same stuff. It's just him having a really good first round.
Yeah.
Again, like always. But unfortunately, MMA fights aren't one round.
Yeah. Yeah, you need some...
But on the other hand...
Go on.
On the other hand, you're just like, could this work against Dricus anyway? Sure.
Well, Dricus, I mean, have you seen that Derek Brunson fight?
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly what I was thinking about.
I mean, speaking of super dangerous one-round fighters, Dricus did end up in a shitload of trouble early against Derek Brunson. By the way, is far messier and less surprising than Chimaev. Even in
who gassed out far harder than Chimaev ever
True.
has. If we're talking about drop-offs.
Yeah.
Brunson was absolutely knackered.
Chimaev will sort of go away offensively, but he won't just crumble.
Yep.
As Brunson did. Yeah, that's a good point. But
he was, Kimbo versus what's-his-face level of just,
Dada.
Dying on his feet exhausted. And Chimaev's never done that,
Yeah, right.
That's one of the better things about him is that, that we saw from those, that fight with, Burns, is that he's much, much less effective, but he's still fighting pretty hard the whole
Absolutely,
time.
if he has to. And when we see the Usman fight, while acknowledging that he did have an injury in that one, he wasn't made to fight that hard. I suspect that if Usman had really pressed him, he would have. He's still there. He just doesn't want to do as much. He's tired.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's tough. You need some nuance to discuss Chimaev. I mean, this has been in my mind with the whole featherweight great conversation as well, because you need a little nuance when you're talking about Conor McGregor's place in that lineage. Because to me, Conor McGregor is decidedly not. He is an all-time great, but he's an all-time great in the way that Salvador Sanchez is an all-time great. Sanchez, who died tragically at 23 years of age, and he was unbelievable. He beat those two great fights with, this is an old boxer for people who don't know. If you don't know Salvador Sanchez, you should check him out. He had two big wins over a guy named Danny Lopez. He had a big win over a really great fighter named Wilfredo Gomez from Puerto Rico, I believe. And then he fought Azuma Nelson, who would go on to be a great featherweight boxing champion in sort of Nelson's breakout performance. It was the people didn't even know who he was at the time, and he took Salvador Sanchez 15 rounds. And that was the last fight on Sanchez's record, and it aged very, very well, considering how great Nelson would prove to be going forward. But you can't really call Sanchez an all-time great in the way that you can, Manny Pacquiao, to just pick another featherweight. Because, Pacquiao's, still fighting. He has an incredible catalog of successes to point to. And Salvador Sanchez, unfortunately, died very young. And so you just can't put him next to those other ones. And that's Conor McGregor. He never defended a belt. The last half of his career, incredibly inconsistent, just chasing money fights. He doesn't belong in the featherweight lineage, even though, as a potential, he clearly had some all-time great qualities. You need some nuance to understand his place there. And you need some nuance to understand the place of a guy like Khamzat Chimaev as well. Because I agree with you that I don't see this really as that kind of breakout performance. But it's simply because I learned nothing about Chimaev. I saw nothing new. What I saw is that he is incredibly fucking good in an all-time great kind of way in the first round. But it doesn't make him a great fighter to me. That's the nuance required. It still doesn't make him a great fighter. It's a weird place to be in where he just went in there and dominated, destroyed a former middleweight champion who just had a great win. But I still look at Chimaev and I'm like, okay, can I please get a fight where I see how can I say he's bad, Phil, when these people aren't capable of giving him pushback in that round? Like, he must be amazingly good.
Yeah.
But also, I still don't really believe him.
Yep.
I don't know. Tough place to be. Anyway, that's enough on that.
I mean, so, when he was first on the way up, I was like, I gave my Twitter précis of, what I thought would happen, which is that he's, so dangerous and clearly talented, and that he just screams championship potential, but he's obviously going to burn out super fast.
Yeah.
And then over time, I've started to think that maybe he would underperform that expectation simply because he couldn't stay healthy.
Yep.
And now, I think I'm back to just sticking with my original assumption. I think he's probably going to win a belt, probably sometime soon. I don't think it's going to last very long.
He seems more than capable of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You look at, as you said, look at the Drinkers fight with Derek Brunson. Like, what if the person he was up against just had a bit more gas tank and was a bit better at wrestling?
Yeah.
And, was a lot better as a grappler.
Yeah, and more decisive with the wrestling. It's like, once again, it's like the difference between Chimaev and Romero. The same difference is there between Chimaev and Brunson. Like, different, much more horrible things happen to you when Chimaev takes you down than when Derek Brunson takes you down and sits on you.
Yeah. But, he can maybe rack up some defenses, but again, I don't trust him to be able to hold on to it for any length of time, because it's just like, what if he, for some reason, cannot finish the other person in the first round? What if he has imagine if he has some, dreadful fight with, Sean Strickland?
Right.
Where he can't finish him?
Right.
Ends up, being chased around the cage, getting front kicked every minute.
I mean, he's firmly in 5-round fight territory, especially now that they're doing more of these 5-round co-mains. Chimaev is probably going to get a lot of future bookings until he gets to a title in the co-main event slot of a pay-per-view, just like he did here. And somebody's going to survive that first round. Worse fighters than Robert Whittaker have.
Yep.
So,
and it's worth noting that, as much when you were saying that, he made it to this fight, it was looking like he wasn't going to for a bit. He was, by some measure, the last person to be able to get on the scales.
Yep.
So if he's now struggling with the 185 weight cut, and again, it's just such a physical, style that he has.
Yes.
That injuries will just, and kind of sort of in some ways have, but they will absolutely ravage him.
Yep.
The minute you start, you start damaging that first round, his efficacy drops off a cliff.
Yep.
So, yeah. Still, yeah, I've reassessed him because he can probably just win a belt. I think he's
that good.
That's based on that.
Yeah.
Because middleweight is kind of trash. But yeah, I just can't expect him to sustain for any amount of time. And yeah, much more of the McGregor or Rousey path than the sort of Topuria path that we expect.
Right.
For Ilya. Yeah,
that's just the place Chimaev is in. He could lose to Sean Strickland. He could also beat Alex Pereira. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Just instantly takes him down and chokes him out. That could happen easily.
Yeah. And one of the worst pure stylistic matchups for him, in literally the 3 weight classes that Alex spans.
All right, let's take a break. And when we return, Lerone Murphy, Dan Ige, and I haven't even mentioned, but Shara Bullet also got a big win in a very fun fight. It has to be said with with Armin Petrosian. So we'll talk about whatever we have time for after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about these other featherweights on the UFC 308 main card. Lerone Murphy, Dan Ige. I'll let you take the lead on this one, Phil. What did you think? I have some thoughts.
Again, I was like a little bit. There was another one where I like picked the guy who won, and I was sad anyway. Partially because like this really felt like the example of why you can't give people game plans which are too divergent from what they want to do in a fight.
Yeah.
Because even if they try their hardest to execute them,
totally,
it is just going to peel away over time. Because Dan Ige came out, and I was like, oh, he understood the assignment.
Yep.
Like he knew what would happen if he stood on the end of Lerone Murphy's jab and just let him get started and let him get pushed back into the fence like Edson Barboza did. He knew, I need to get after this person, and I need to get after him very fast.
Yep.
And he did, and he was mostly like kicking his ass for the first round.
Yeah. He put a ton of pressure on him. He took him down with ease, in fact. It was such a surprise to Murphy. And then he got Murphy so tense and overthrowing, just trying to claw back the momentum, that he nearly knocked him out on the counter.
Yep. Each of a left hook.
Yep.
To catch Murphy,
in fact, it was
out of position.
In a transitional way. It was a punch that I know Dan Tom loves to talk about. He and I talked about it together years ago now on his podcast, Protect Your Neck. If it's still going. Is Protect Your Neck still going? Dan's still doing that, right?
I hope so. I know Dan was thinking about taking a break, but I hope he's still out there.
He's been getting fucking pounded with the betting, so I know that's unfortunate. But we talked about the Southpaw Killer, which is often an overhand left, like a shift into Southpaw and then the overhand left instead of just the lead left hook. This is like the shot that Jorge Masvidal caught Darren Till with. It's also the shot in a different sport and many, many years ago that James Toney knocked out Michael Nunn with, a sort of shifting southpaw overhand left hook. And that was exactly what happened here. Lerone Murphy went southpaw, and then Dan Ige shifted back into southpaw as Murphy overthrew, trying to come after him, and dipped back in with this left hand, completely blindsided Murphy. He's very lucky he didn't get knocked out cold, because that was a knockout punch. But I love the point that you started with, that not everybody can do everything. And you can equip Dan Ige with this game plan, and it's the right game plan in one sense. In another sense, it is clearly not sustainable for Dan Ige. He gassed really bad, putting that much pressure on, and probably also because he went for the finish really hard after he hurt Murphy, and I can't blame him. But B, he is not actually equipped with all the depth required to make this game plan work, like beyond the period of surprise. Like in that sense, it was very effective. It shocked Murphy. He didn't like it. But once the shock wore off, we're back in a position where now Dan Ige has to press forward, but he still doesn't have a range game to speak of. He just doesn't. Dan Ige does not have a great consistent jab. He doesn't have very good advancing footwork. He's not much of a combination puncher coming forward. Like, he just doesn't have many range tools. He has to draw people onto him to hit them. And he just kind of got lost in a fight where, frankly, I thought he managed to make Lerone Murphy look kind of bad, but couldn't actually seal the deal.
Yep. Yeah, as I said, it kind of bummed me out a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, especially because it made Murphy look bad in the process. So, like, I didn't feel like anybody won. It was dissatisfying.
Yeah, partially that partially because, like, yeah, I thought Ige was looking great.
Yeah.
It was his chance to sort of break out of a gatekeeping role.
Yep.
But also because, like, and, this kind of thing happens a lot. It's the sort of, he just should have done this, kind of approach to analysis, which extends all the way to, exactly to the fighter's last fight. And no before, nothing before that. So, like, when, like, Curtis Blades got KO'd by, like, Derek Lewis, and it was like, well, why did he try shooting on him? He was beating him up on the feet. It's like, if he'd continued standing with Derek Lewis and been knocked out on the feet and never shot for a takedown, people would have excoriated him for being a moron.
Right. Or why didn't Kane shoot on JDS in the first 40 seconds of the fight? That was a big one after that shocking upset.
Even though he did.
Yeah, he did. But also he didn't get him down, and so he's a fucking idiot for choosing to strike with him.
Yeah. But and so, and a lot of the time it's just like, oh, this guy simply should have, done X, Y, Z, and then he would have won the fight. And then you can have a fight where people will just will just take exactly the opposite conclusion. He simply should have done the thing which would have won him the fight. It's so obvious.
Right.
And with this, it's obvious. It's the Murphy fight, and then it's the Lopez fight. Because the Lopez fight is that he starts off, he's getting the shit kicked out of him, comes back, going way better towards the end.
Right.
And you're like, oh, if only he'd started faster.
Yeah, and it was the pressure and the aggression that got him there in the end, right?
Yep. And, he took that away from that fight, and he came in with it. And as you said, it was in some ways a good idea. But it was also just, like, unsustainable. He gassed himself out because I think, in part, because it was so successful.
Yeah.
He was just like, damn, I'm going to do it. And, yeah, partially because, it's not a sustainable game plan for him against someone who is a much better control fighter, even, looking as uncomfortable as Murphy did, than Diego Lopez is. Yeah,
and it's just the fact that even if he hadn't hurt Murphy and gone hard for a finish there, like, Dan Igue's had crazier fights than that. He's had 3-round wars. Like, it wasn't even that. It wasn't just that gassed him. It's the fact that energy systems are very fragile and usually are tied in ways you don't quite realize, like, psychologically, to the style that you have gotten used to. And I think simply by starting a fight really hot in a style that he's not comfortable with, Dan Ige was probably tenser than he is used to being in all kinds of little ways that are difficult to notice until they start taking a toll on you. That's what happens when you fight 100%. against type. One of the biggest things is you just find yourself getting worn out way faster than you would have, even in an equally intense fight that was better suited to your normal approach.
Yeah, we see it happen a lot, and I have to feel that was what we saw here as well. But just a bummer, really. It was a good fight in a lot of ways.
A great fight.
Both guys showed they were super tough. Like, it was violent. It was competitive. But bummed me out.
A little bit of everything too. I mean, we got tons of great striking exchanges. We got some really cool scrambles on the ground. It went everywhere and was very entertaining. But I want to fixate a little more on Lerone Murphy, though. He did come away the winner. I will reiterate, I didn't think this was a very good performance. After that, what felt to me like a huge level up against Edson Barboza, where he was really mature and composed. He fought 5 great rounds with a sort of like dual directional approach, choosing his moments to pressure and force the issue and really punish Barboza as all the best people who beat him have. And then also taking time off, so to speak, to control him from range and just kind of mitigate so he could recover for the next assault. That was such a mature performance from Lerone Murphy. And
And then here he is against Dan Ige, and I think he made some kind of baffling decisions all throughout the fight. First of those being, where was his jab? The jab which we thought was instrumental to his win over Barboza and would be instrumental to this one, because as we predicted, Dan Ige was going to get stuck at range and wasn't very good coming forward. And we got a permutation of that kind of fight, of course. Ige came in prepared to do something a little different, but it still ended up being a fight where Ige found himself stuck at range on the feet. But it wasn't really... The jab was super inconsistent from Murphy. He wasn't really using it. I don't think he didn't... I wish I had numbers on this. I bet he threw 3 times as many jabs against Edson Barboza in just the first 3 rounds of that fight.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like way more focused on that weapon. Here, I thought he was overthrowing. He was like looking for a knockout shot. He was not putting together nice, quick, relaxed combinations. I thought it was frankly a crazy approach. No matter what direction you have Dan Ige moving, I think that's a very crazy misstep against a guy whose most dangerous ability is his counterpunching. To not focus on the jab, not focus on controlling range, and to tense up and overthrow on single power shots, that's a series of terrible decisions to make against a counterpuncher like Dan Ige. I think Murphy's lucky to have gotten away with the way he fought for long stretches of this fight.
Yeah. It was a reversion to form.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then in round 3, he was out there grappling with Dan Ige.
Yeah,
it's like, bro,
this felt very much like, let's say, I'll say like old school Lerone Murphy, but you know what I mean.
Totally. Yeah.
That when we first saw Lerone Murphy on the come up, he was just some guy who was clearly like very athletic, who would just. He would just outfight people. You know, he wouldn't necessarily have a consistent strategy from fight to fight.
Yeah.
He would just end up, he would have if they had a war with him, he would be able to like beat them in the war. If they were trying to control him, then he would be able to just out damage them. But you're talking a very strategically reactive fighter who then looked in the Edson Barboza fight like he wasn't that anymore. He was being strategically like incisive and strategically like he was building his own fight for the first real time that we'd seen.
Right.
And then I think Dan Ige going nuts basically drove that straight out of his head. It just reverted to type.
Yeah. And frequently in his early UFC career, Murphy would start out immediately just accepting whatever kind of fight the opponent wanted to have. Mm-hmm. And I mean, one of the things aside from his obvious athletic gifts that we were impressed by as a prospect was his resilience and his ability to kind of find a winning fight out of that and to settle in even when things typically started kind of bad for him. That was sort of the norm. And I would say this was exactly that fight, but it looks worse now, having seen what he did to Barboza. Because I know
it's like if Ilya Topuria had that Josh Emmett fight,
right,
and then went immediately back to just like swinging haymakers at everyone,
right. And with Topuria, we've seen him, I think, continually adding new layers and refining his game and making fewer of the mistakes that got him punished, say, in the Jai Herbert fight or even in the Bryce Mitchell fight. I think he is leveling up constantly one fight to the next. Murphy has now proven that he is not necessarily going to be able to do that because, it feels like more of a step back than if he had just been this guy the whole time. Definitely.
I agree. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a testament to the fact that this was actually just like a really exciting, high quality card, is that it was absolutely stacked, like end to end with depressing outcomes. and I still came out at the end. I mean, you know, I hate Shara Bullet. As soon as Dan Ige started fighting well, I was like, I would like Dan Ige to win.
Yeah.
Probably would have liked to see Alexander Rakic get the upset.
Yep.
Obviously, I want Robert Whittaker and Max Holloway to win.
Yep.
I was, you know, as I said, RDA just like finally succumbing to Father Time. Depressing outcomes, but I was not depressed at the end of this card because it was just really good.
Just saw some high level fighting and some history being made. I mean, it can be the result you don't want, but it's hard to argue that this card did not deliver some really momentous, interesting results, right?
Yep, it was a great card. You know, maybe didn't have the prelim support, but still just one of the best of the year. Mm-hmm. All things considered.
Yeah, it could have been one of the best of the year just with Topuria Holloway. I mean, what a fucking fight. Mm-hmm. What a piece of matchmaking. What a tremendous fight as it actually played out. And we are witnessing a great fighter building his legend on the backs of other great fighters. It's hard to, even if you're disappointed by the result, it's hard not to be excited by that. Okay. Well, there will be some bonus content from this recording session to join the little short bonus episode I posted last week. So make sure you head over to the Heavy Hands Patreon to check that out. Probably, depending on how things are edited, you will end up hearing us talk with quite a lot of praise about Magomed Ankalaev's win over Alexander Rakic, and probably you will hear us talk about Shara Bullet and Armen Petrosyan over there on the Patreon as well, if you didn't hear about them on this episode earlier. Next week, we have a decent enough looking fight night card. In fact, I have to double check to see if it is actually at the Apex. No, it's not. That's why it's good. Brandon Moreno versus Amir Albazi, a meaningful sort of top contenders fight for the flyweight division. Aaron Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas are competing in a 5-round co-main event. Keep that in mind, Phil. We're going to remember that for next week this time.
Yeah.
This time we will remember it's a 5-round co-main event. And there's some other pretty solid stuff sprinkled throughout this card. Ooh, Jack Shore is making his return, and he's fighting the ascendant Yusuf Zalal. I'm very interested to see that. So that'll be next week. And until then, make sure you check us out on Twitter, where we are constantly hanging out, getting into fights with other MMA fans. We're on there all day, every day. That's at Evil Greg Jackson for Phil and at Boxing Bush for me. Also, please check out my Substack. I will have very shortly, I think perhaps the first of a 2-part breakdown of this Topuria Holloway fight showing up there. That's facepunching.substack.com. And until next week, I hope you all enjoyed the show. And if you came here for the finer points of face punching, you did come to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.